I'm Bruce Moon. In this video, Going the Distance, we'll be exploring the life and work of Don Seiden, artist, therapist, and teacher. For the last 47 years, he has been a subtle yet compelling force in the field of art therapy in the Chicago area. Perhaps his primary contributions to the profession have been as the founder of the Illinois Art Therapy Association and the Graduate Art Therapy program at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. Don was also the first art therapist to work in the psychiatric unit at Rush Presbyterian St. Luke's Medical Center. As a result of his dynamic teaching style and warm, authentic manner, he has influenced the lives of countless students and colleagues. But above all else, his steadfast trust in the power of art as a healing force has allowed him to serve as a mentor, role model, and inspiration.
I think Don's art is all a response. I don't know that he teases out the art therapy part from that. I think more art therapy comes from Don as an artist.
I think it started when I was a very young child, and I used to have to come home from school, and there was a lady who would sit on the first floor in the hallway and talk to herself. And it scared the hell out of me. I had to go around her to get upstairs to the apartment. And it was my first contact with mental illness, I guess. I didn't know what it was, what was going on there. In high school, I read a lot about Freud and Jung and Menninger. And it was an interest that kept going, you know, but it never really fulfilled itself until later on. I wanted to ultimately find myself in terms of work. My father hated his work. I didn't want to work at anything that I hated. I was trying to find ways to evolve myself into work that I loved. When I got out of the Navy, I was 18 years old, or almost 19, I guess. And I decided to go to college. And I went to the University of Illinois, which was then at Navy Pier in Chicago. It was the first college of the University of Illinois here in Chicago. And I enrolled in a business administration program. There was something about, at that time, I didn't know what I wanted to do, so I went into business administration. I failed about 3 out of 5 courses the first semester, and then I finally had to give up the second semester and get out of there. It was absolutely not for me. I had met a girl, and we dated, and she was an artist. And I had always been interested in art sort of as an offshoot of a lot of other things that I was interested in. We got married and began to take courses in art. And it was my first real contact with real art and artists. My sculptures, which I started as a sculptor, okay? And I was like in the art world as a sculptor. That's how I got going. And it was interesting, you had mentioned at one point here about boxing. I was not really an athlete, but I enjoyed athletics, and I found boxing to be something that really very relieving and releasing for me. It wasn't so much the violence that was attached to it, because it wasn't all that violent, strangely enough. It was, you know, what it was. But I enjoyed it, and it got a lot out, but it was not enough. And it seemed almost as if there was some contact or some relationship between that kind of thing and art making. So I began to make art and try to figure out ways I could make a living at it. I was married. We ultimately had a child already, and I didn't know what to do. And one of my art classes was the sculpture class, and it was with a guy who was absolutely incoherent as far as words were concerned. And I learned so much about art and form and sculpture from him. And during all that time, I was doing some commercial sculpture. I worked for interior designers, and I made things for them, which helped pay for school. I began to do sculpture on my own. and show the sculpture at various galleries. And I was getting a little reputation, and got some articles written, and had a couple of shows and things of that nature. So things were happening to me in the art world, but boy, I couldn't figure out how to make a living. I used to take my sculpture into gift shops, and they would say, yeah, we could sell that for $5, yeah. Until I decided, well, I need a job, I have a family, and I figured teaching would be the best alternative. So I went into art education, got my degree in art education at the Illinois Institute of Technology.
Started as a sculptor, was teaching at the school, started teaching in high schools, became affiliated with the art education department at the School of Art Institute.
I loved teaching. I never thought I would, but it happened. It was almost as if I loved teaching as much as I loved making art. So everything was working for me except one thing. I didn't know exactly how to put together all the things that were happening to me at the time. And that's when the idea of mental health came back to me. I had an uncle who wound up paranoid schizophrenic, and this early experience which I had had. And I met somebody who introduced me to somebody at Rush Presbyterian St. Luke's Hospital in the psychiatric department. And I got a summer job there, and I was working with groups as an art teacher. That was the beginning of an interest that I found in something called art therapy. And at the same time, I was offered a job at the Art Institute for 1 year because someone went on a leave of absence or a sabbatical. And sure enough, after the year was out, they hired me full-time. So I went into the sculpture department at the School of the Art Institute, which was something I never even dreamed of, but it happened. And wound up chairing the sculpture department, wound up there after about 5 years, and a job at Rush turned into something far more than the summer. As a matter of fact, it was a job that lasted for about 20 years. And it was there that I began to change my badge from occupational therapy to art therapy. It happened over time, and it happened over, I was just like full of ideas. I mean, how to help people find themselves through art and how to look at it.
He's the, great uncle of art therapy in Chicago. I mean, he really was one of the founding people who, along with people like Ralph Levinson and Millie Chapin and other people who were kind of working early days, began to sort of define the field, carve out an area.
And we had, during those days at the hospital, doctors had so much time to hang out in the office, and we would have seminars every week. And they would talk to us, and I would bring in art, and we would have discussions. Psychiatrists, psychoanalysts, psychologists, social workers. It was amazing. It was the whole education. It was my master's degree, which I never got. So art therapy began to be part of me in my actual work. I was also showing my art, and in galleries, I was exhibiting, and I was making art, and I was doing work with people, everything I wanted. So what happened then was that I began to think to myself, this is way too big. And it was something that I began to get in contact with some people who were talking about the American Art Therapy Association, which at that time I think was in competition with another group called Artists as Therapists or something. So I joined both of those groups just to be a part of them. Ran into a little trouble with the American Art Therapy Association at the time. That thought, why are you doing this? I said, well, it is, after all, America. You can join what you want, that kind of stuff. And at that time, or nearly that time, I decided to make a proposal for a course called Art and Psychology.
And then in the mid-70s or so, started pulling in courses that were more art therapeutic as part of the art education program at the school.
And the people who picked it up were the art education department. So I taught that class in the art ed department. I brought in psychiatrists and psychologists and artists, and they dialogued together. And the work and they spoke about their work and what creativity was all about and what art meant to people besides just being a good artist and so on. And it was a fabulous course, and it led me to the next step, which wound up ultimately to be a class called art therapy.
And so he already was carving out this niche when I had first met him.
By that time, I had to move out of the sculpture department. I was no longer, I was becoming dangerous in a way, and I recognized that it was not a good thing. So I moved from there into art education, where I was welcomed, even though they knew nothing about art therapy and didn't know what it was about, but I did.
Jackie is art. I mean, in other words, her whole being, in a sense, is like a work of art. I have changed my kind of viewpoint about who's an artist and who isn't a lot. When I first married Jackie, you know, because Jackie was all over the place as an artist, and I was sort of a professional in a line of building a career and all that stuff, and I didn't quite understand that her art could be her roller skating in the schoolyard or dancing downtown or doing things that were expressive and full of life. So when we got married, our house turned into a big, giant work of art. Eventually, that's how we arrived at this place. I mean, mostly due to her ability to bring things together within this framework.
But in my time, when you would go away, everything in the house, say people went away for summer, everything in the house would be shrouded in a sheet. And the shrouds, again, are very, a shroud is a terrifying thought. I mean, what's under a shroud? A dead body's under a shroud, but they're gorgeous. So that was the idea, take things that take your breath away with fright, but are so elevating and lofty, and I hate to use the word spiritual, but I guess that's what it is. So I tried to keep the sheets pretty, staggered all throughout, because that's what we would have used. And when I tried to substitute sometime a sheet for a towel.
But there is nothing so intimate as making art or making love.
I mean, I had for a while a real obsession with coffins, and I even went and photographed them downstairs just because I think they're gorgeous.
A mistress, as a wife, as a husband, as a friend, my God, the relationship between the artist and the art is very intense sometimes. I think the one thing that I felt that I accomplished as the founder of this program was the idea that art therapy originates from the creative process in making art. Mm-hmm. Look, we start with sensation. Mm-hmm. I mean, my eyesight, my hearing, and my taste, and my smell, and my touch are my immediate contact with the world. Something happens when you're up close to a book, or you're swishing around with your painting, or you're squeezing clay, or you're hammering stone. There's something about that intimacy that can never be really repeated on any other level. I see art like air or water. It can enter into anything and everything. And I had talked about art and science have always been linked up. I mean, great scientists and inventors always look to art as the peak of truth.
He's kind of like the grandpa of the students in a way. He's imparting his wisdom and sharing his life story. When students meet with him, they just come away feeling really good and like feeling like they're a part of something really good in this world.
And little by little, we began to develop a program in art therapy, which was a certificate program. And that certificate program, I had to get credentials from the American Art Therapy Association. I was grandfathered in. I had to do a lot of showing of what I had been doing and all that sort of thing, but it worked. And little by little, the art therapy began to emerge in that department. And finally, what happened there was that we had a review of the certificate program one year, and it was like an inquisition because for budgets. And here I was proposing a whole new master's program, and it was hard.
You know, at a time when people were trying to make a very clinical position for art therapy, he always worked from and spoke from the position of a working artist.
Don always leads with his art, and it's where he really shines and connects with people.
This was all about power. How to get power. So that's the story. So it's been a trip.